Hello everyone, my name is Owen McNamara. I'm a research analyst on growing up in Ireland. And along with my colleagues, Aisling Murray, Emer Smith, Dorothy Watson, and my former colleague, Tarania Murphy, I co-authored this report, The Lives of 17, 18-year-olds, and I'm going to be presenting on it today. So through today's launch, I'm aiming to somewhat mirror the overall structure of the report itself and discuss briefly each of the topics that we have listed here. So by way of an introduction, just give some background on the study. In terms of context, we might look at the family finances and family structure of the young people involved in the study. And then we have the key domains of research. So physical health and well-being, education, socio-emotional well-being, relationships, social participation, and then hopefully we will come to some conclusions. So first I'll provide a quick intro to the study for those of you who mightn't be that familiar with it. Growing Up in Ireland is the national longitudinal study of young people in Ireland. It consists of two cohorts. We have cohort 98, that's the group of interest for the report today. They were primarily born in 1998. And then we also have a second cohort, cohort 08, again, they were born in 2008. So this report follows the interviews at 17 and 18 years for cohort 98. These took place in 2015, 2016, and they represent the third wave of data collection for this group of young people. They were originally visited and interviewed at age 9 in 2008. They were revisited at age 13 and again at 17, 18. We have just over 6,000 young people and their families included in the analysis for this report. So this group of young people, they've participated in all three waves of the study to date. So we have data on following them from the ages of 9 through 13 to 17, 18. And that's kind of presented in the report here. This 6,000 young people represent 73% of all young people included at age 9 and 83% of those included at age 13. So there's always going to be some degree of attrition in a longitudinal study such as this, but we kind of do take some measures to account for that. And so the data has been reweighted to try and ensure representativeness as well. Just some basic descriptives there on the cohort. They are primarily age 17, 80% were 17 and 20% 18. And we see a fairly even gender split there as well, 51% male, 49% female. So this first graph shows the structure of the young people's families when they started the study at age 9, we can see here. And then again, for the most recent wave at age 17, 18. So we're comparing one parent versus two parent families. At the current wave, we can see that 20% are in one parent families and 80% in two parent families. And you can kind of see here that there really hasn't been much change overall between ages 9 and 17, 18. Although when you look at it in a little bit more detail and we explore at the individual level, you can see that there is a bit more movement. So those moving from one to two parent families, that's 4% overall. And there was a little bit more movement in the opposite direction. So 7% of young people moved from two parent to one parent families between the ages of 9 and 17, 18. This next graph provides some information on the family finances of the young people involved in the study, and indeed it kind of gives some indication of the wider economic context in Ireland across all three waves of the study. You can see here, so we started in 2008 when they were aged 9, and this was kind of pre-recession periods, kind of towards the end of the Celtic Tiger, if you will. What we did was we asked, excuse me, we asked the parents of the young people about the degree of difficulty they had making ends meet. And we can see here that just 7% said that they had difficulty or great difficulty making ends meet. And you can see a massive increase here between the ages of 9 and 13, because at age 13, this was 2012, so we were right at peak recessionary period. Unemployment was at its highest. And then by the age 17, 18 in 2016, we can see something of a financial or an economic recovery in this kind of post-recession period here. So that figure has dropped to 18%. And that's kind of, we see further indication of this post-recession financial recovery amongst families by looking at another measure that we recorded. So this is median weekly income as well. So initially it was quite high, 863 in 2008. That was a reduction, a significant reduction there you can see during the recessionary period, and then we can see something of a recovery here at the most recent wave. So moving on, just looking at the health and the physical health of the young people, we asked parents to rate their child's general health at all three waves of the study. And as you can kind of see here, we've aged 9, 13, 17, 18. The vast majority of parents have rated their child's health as either very healthy or healthy with a few minor problems. I think this is just over 96% of young people are in good health. And this is kind of what we would hope to see, obviously, amongst young people, so that they're enjoying good general health. They're not reporting high incidence of any sort of chronic illnesses or anything like that. So this is certainly a positive outcome and one we would hope to see. But what we do see, and what is slightly concerning, is that there is something of a social gradient here. So the percentage of young people who reported their own health as excellent was much greater in high-income families versus low-income families. So 43% in the high-income families said their health was excellent versus 29% in low-income families. Moving on, we measured height and weight of all the young people involved in the study with a view to calculating BMI, and then that allows us to categorize young people as either normal weight, overweight, or obese. And you can see here, we have males on the left and females on the right. And there's kind of two things to note here, that there is a gender difference at all three waves. So if you look at the most recent wave, 25% of males are either overweight or obese versus 30% of females. So there is this gender difference that we do see, females slightly more at risk. But over time as well, what we do see is that young men between the ages of 13 and 17, 18, there is a significant increase in the number of young men who are classified as obese as well. And what we might expect to see, if you look at Healthy Ireland and other studies like that, is actually a reversing of this disparity as they enter adulthood. What you see amongst adults in Ireland and abroad is that it's actually adult males who tend to report higher levels of overweight and obesity. Again, we see something of a social class difference here. So there are higher rates of overweight and obesity in those young people from lower parental education families. So to the tune of 34% are either overweight or obese in low parental education families, compared to 21% in high parental education families. So just kind of considering the gender differences that we've just observed there, and looking at efforts to lose weight, what we can see here that those gender differences are still evident in terms of exercising to lose weight and dieting to lose weight. Young women reporting higher levels of doing both of those. But it is notable, again, that even so, that whilst young men aren't doing quite as much as young women in this regard, their efforts to lose weight, 50% are reporting that they've done that, or dieting to lose weight at 38% then. And then we look at exercising to bulk weight, we can see that young men are obviously much more inclined to be exercising to bulk up, 69% versus 20% there. Just also on the health, we've looked at some risky behaviors. So in terms of alcohol consumption and alcohol and drinking behavior, 90% reported that they'd ever drank, and most are now current drinkers as well. So, and then when we move beyond that, and we use this World Health Organization audit screening tool to look at drinking behavior. And using that tool, 31% of the cohort would be classified as risky drinkers, 3% would be high risk or harmful, and then a further 2% are possibly alcohol dependent. So that's kind of some kind of cause for concern with those findings there. And if we look at this top 5%, if you will, the high risk and the possibly alcohol dependent as well, increased risk to be in that category if you are a male, if you are slightly older, so the 18-year-olds, and also if you're an early consumer. So we asked about drinking as well at 13, and those young people who said they had a drink at 13 were more inclined to be in either one of these two categories here. Moving on, we asked about smoking as well. We asked the parents. 72% were of the opinion that they didn't think that the child had ever tried smoking, but then when we asked the young people themselves, 49% said that they had tried a cigarette. Some broadly positive findings here in terms of the fact that just 8% were daily smokers, and 12% smoked occasionally. We also asked about drug consumption as well. Again, we asked the parents, and 88% didn't think that the child had ever tried cannabis. But again, we do see some quite a disparity when we talk to the young people themselves, because 30% said that they had ever tried cannabis, and 10% reported occasional use. Moving on from health now to education. So in terms of retention in second level, it's really high, and this is an encouraging result. Most of the young people were still at second level education, 83%. A further 12% had moved on and were in further education, higher education or training. And that just meant that there was just 5% who are either working or seeking employment or unemployed. In terms of expectations for higher education, this is another positive finding. 80% of both parents and the young people themselves expected to go to further education or higher education. We broke this down and looked at differences according to social groups, so in terms of parental education, in terms of family income. And we did see some social group variation, but it really was universally high, so that is a positive finding. In terms of positive interactions with teachers and attitudes to schools, we asked about that as well. 85% of young people felt that they could talk to a teacher if needed, so that is a positive finding there. 73% said that they'd been praised for their work by their teachers. There is something of a gender disparity, a gender gap there. So 61% of females were praised for written work versus 51% of males. So young women more likely to say that they'd kind of positive interactions with their teachers. And then when we asked about whether or not they liked school, 24% overall said that they disliked being at school, and we do see something of a social class difference there. So that's kind of that figure is higher for those from low-income families, 33%, versus those from the highest income families, where it's 16% disliked being at school. We also looked at performance in the junior cert. So what's going to be represented here in this this graph is junior cert's grade point average. So the grade point average is a kind of way of looking at performance in the junior cert. It's a composite measure where of a young person's performance across all subjects in the junior cert. And you can kind of see here at the bottom, it gives some examples. So it ranges from 0 to 10. So a 10 would represent if you got a higher level A in all subjects, and a 0 would be if you got an E, an F, or an NG in all subjects. And a 1 point difference it would be deemed to be very substantial, because it's the equivalent of all A's versus all B's in every subject. So what we see is there is a small but significant difference between young men and women. Females tend to perform slightly better in the junior cert. But we see much greater disparity when we start to look at social class differences. So if we're looking at maternal education, if the young person's mother had junior cert or less, they were scoring 6. But if the mother had a degree or more, the score was 7.5. We see similar disparities according to family type as well. Those from one-parent families don't tend to perform quite as well as those from two-parent families. In terms of career guidance, and we also asked about the different sources of career guidance and the importance of those sources. Far and away, the most important or most consulted, the most consulted source of information was the mother, followed by the father. And we're looking at this here again according to social class. So those from professional managerial families versus those from families where parents have never been employed. So more from the kind of professional managerial families do consult mothers for career guidance, but similar levels of importance assigned to the mother. When we look at kind of school-based guidance, so guidance classes, similar enough levels there. But what is very notable here is that young people from less advantaged families placed a lot more importance on this guidance class than those from professional managerial classes. And we see similar sort of trends there when we're looking at individual guidance sessions. Again, quite a large difference there in the amount of importance assigned to that. And that kind of points towards the importance of school-based guidance versus the kind of home-based guidance in terms of what they're going to do later in life. Looking at socio-emotional well-being, we asked the young people about life satisfaction, a fairly simple question here, in that we're just kind of basically, if you were to describe how satisfied you are with your own life in general, how would you rate it on a scale of 0 to 10? and this kind of gives some perception of their kind of positivity and satisfaction with life. So a really positive score here, 8 out of 10 was the median score, and 85% of young people gave a rating of 6 or more. For those young people who gave a kind of negative or a lower score, that is less than 5, that was kind of more common amongst females, 18% versus 13% of males. And also for those who had given a very low satisfaction score at the age of 13 as well. So we're seeing something of a longitudinal trend there as well. Continuing on, we asked the young parents to complete this strength and difficulties questionnaire. So this kind of provides a wider overview of socio-emotional well-being. And it looks at 4 distinct difficulties that young people might have, along with one kind of positive thing as well here. So the 4 difficulties are emotional symptoms, conduct problems, hyperactivity, and fear problems, all rated out of 10. So the lower the score that they record on this, the better, because it's a difficulty, it's a negative thing. For prosocial behavior, the higher the score, the better. And we're looking at this in terms of comparing genders, and we can see that, we can use all these 5 measures here to come up with a total difficulty score. And we can see that males are performing slightly better than females, so the lower the better here. But this difference primarily seems to be driven by the score with regard to emotional symptoms. But in general, very good scores for both genders. Moving on, we looked at depressive symptoms. So young people completed this short moods and feelings questionnaire. It's a 13-item scale, and it provides a brief assessment of depressive symptoms. But it's important to bear in mind that it can categorize people as likely to be depressed, but this is not the same as a proper diagnosis of depression. So it's important to bear that in mind. Out of a maximum score of 26, a score of 11 or more was considered to be putting you in the threshold for this likely to be depressed category. And overall, 20% of young people would be categorized as being likely to be depressed. When we break this down according to gender, we can see a difference here. So young women at increased risk, 24 versus 16% of males. And again, we see something of a longitudinal trend here as well. So we asked the same questions at the age of 13, and those young people who would be above the threshold or at risk of being depressed at age 13, 42% of those young people were at risk or were in the same category at age 17, 18. Moving on, we're looking at relationships. So parental relationships. We also explored the dynamics of the parent-child relationship, and we did that by measuring levels of parental monitoring, parental control, and young person disclosure as well. So these first 2 measure monitoring, knowing where the young person is during the free time, disclosure, the young person spontaneously informs the parents. Those were recorded and reported by the parent. And control, so the young person must inform the parent of the whereabouts. The young people themselves told us or rated that themselves. And we can see that there are what we did find was there were high average scores throughout. So this graph we're looking at here, it displays the percentage of males and females in the top quintile. So that's the top 20% scores for each of these variables. And we can see something of a gender difference across the board. So females were more likely to experience all of these things in terms of monitoring by both parent 1, parent 2, disclosure to parent 1 and to parent 2, and in terms of their own experience, they felt kind of parental control more so than young men. In terms of relationship with friends, we also asked young people about that. And they typically hang out with between 3 and 5 or 6 to 10 friends. Young women were more likely to report to their parents that they were more likely to report that their parents had met most or all of their friends. 61% of young women had said that they did that, compared to 46% of young men. And hanging out with friends was cited as a favorite activity by all. So 98% of young people said they hung out with friends at least some of the time. But young people from less advantaged families seem to do so more often. We also asked young people to complete this peer attachment scale. So this assesses positive and negative aspects of relationships with friends. So females scored higher for trust communication, and kind of overall attachment with friends, whilst males scored lower, and in this instance better, better for anger and alienation. But again, overall, what we see is that both groups had high scores in terms of trust, communication, and overall attachment. And this kind of points towards the fact that they have good quality relationships with their friends. Moving on to social participation and social responsibility. So this is the last section now. In terms of volunteering, this is a really positive finding. We think that 28% of young people said that they had volunteered at some stage in the last year. And if you kind of consider this in the context of these are 17, 18-year-olds, they're preparing for the leaving cert, so they mightn't have a lot of free time. So this is really positive, we think. And they're committing quite a significant amount of time as well. So the most common amount of time is somewhere between 3 and 5 or 6 to 10 hours. The type of things they're doing are kind of volunteering with non-sporting organizations. So that might be things like Scouts, or also with sports organizations. So maybe doing training or refereeing or supervising. We also ask young people about their confidence in institutions and their experiences of discrimination. In terms of confidence, those institutions that kind of rated quite highly, so young people saying I have a great deal of, or quite a lot of confidence in, it was the Gardaí, the education system and the healthcare system, all above 2/3 of young people said they had a great deal of confidence in them. At the lower end of the scale, we have the church and politicians. So these results kind of mirror what you might expect to see amongst adults as well. In terms of the young people's own experience of everyday discrimination, slightly worrying that almost half felt that they were regularly treated unfairly. They felt that they were treated with less courtesy or respect. They felt that they were treated as if they weren't as smart as other people. And the most common reasons that they gave us for this discrimination were to do with their age. So 49% cited that as one of the main reasons, but also gender there as well. So this is just the last kind of finding here, I think. We looked at antisocial behavior as well. So asking young people if they'd partaken of any sort of antisocial behavior. And overall, 50% said that they had, and that kind of could be cause for concern, but I think that's alleviated somewhat when you look at the fact that the kind of primary type of antisocial behavior is not having paid the correct bus fare or train fare. And this is something that was probably kind of came to the fore after they turned 16, because it was a subsidized fare for under 16. So if you kind of remove this one thing, this not paying the correct fare from the analysis and compare age 17 to age 13, actually levels of antisocial behavior are quite similar at both ages. More likely to be perpetuated by males and those who reported higher levels of antisocial behavior at the age of 15. In conclusion, so we can see that there are a number of risk factors and challenges as young people move from adolescence to adulthood. Persistent inequalities, particularly in terms of gender and social class. Early signs of disengagement from school, and particularly in terms of the junior cert performance. Continuing high levels of overweight and obesity. There are risks to their emotional well-being in terms of depression. They are experiencing quite a high level of discrimination, and worrying trends from the age of 13 in terms of obesity, depressive symptoms, and antisocial behavior. So hopefully all of these risks or threats will be of some benefit in that they will provide an important evidence base for early and focused policy interventions to address these issues. And just to kind of finish on some of the more positive things, in terms of the resources available to young people, they were initially, when I initially drafted this presentation, they were experiencing economic recovery, although the future is now uncertain when we kind of consider the implications of the COVID pandemic. And generally good physical health, low levels of smoking there, positive school experiences, high expectations for future or higher education, life satisfaction levels are high, strong friendship networks, and also strong relationships with their parents. So many encouraging findings which would point toward a healthy, ambitious, and socially engaged group of young people. Just finally finish up with some thanks. I would like to thank my co-authors. And of course, I would really like to pay a lot of thanks to the wider Growing Up in Ireland team. This is very much a team effort. This report is years in the making, so there was a lot went on in terms of the study design, the piloting, the field work, data collection, data analysis. So this report just represents the very kind of tip of the iceberg in terms of all the work that went in. I'd like to thank our colleagues at Trinity College and CSO. I'd really like to thank the the DCYA, because we worked very closely with them in the production of this report. And again, thanks to the Minister for taking the time to launch the report today. I would like to thank all of the schools who are involved in the study. And last but not least, I would like to pay thanks to all of the young people and their families who continue to be very generous with their time in terms of taking part in the study. So that is me done. Thank you. I think I'll hand you back over to Dorothy now.